Well, ladies and gentlemen, in this video, I'm going to be giving some updated paths for Donald Trump in terms of winning the 2024 election. I think we can pretty much agree on most of these swing states. You can see Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. I am throwing Virginia in there because the recent polling out of Virginia has been a little bit more positive than Minnesota. I'm giving Minnesota to Harris, although I do want to see more polls out of Minnesota because the only ones that we've gotten were laden with ridiculous response bias because they were right after Harris was installed. And it was when she had all of her hype, but she might still win Minnesota. Let's just give it to her in this scenario. And we will look at Virginia as being the main swing state with Trump only down by a few points there. And the approval is looking amazing for Trump in that state. You've also got North Carolina, Georgia, Pennsylvania, and then we do have the one district in Maine. So this is what's going on in Maine. Not that it matters too much, but there was some recent polling that a lot of people are calling erroneous, but it was not good polling for Trump. It had the one district, I think it's the second district, that Trump won by about 5 points in 2020. It's only one electoral vote, but Harris was winning it by about 5 points. And then Maine at large, which we thought was going to be a swing state, Harris was up pretty significantly there too. New Hampshire is another one you could argue is a swing state. Harris was only up by 5. But to keep this a little bit more simple, New Hampshire kind of seems like more Democrat this year. Let's just give it to him rather than do all these different paths, potentially including New Hampshire. At this point, I would say 218 to 212. And it's pretty crazy to even have these safe states like that. The reason the Republicans this year are leading the safe states, if you will, although I guess you could throw Virginia in there, but I'm not going to. The reason is because Florida now is not a swing state, and it's pretty crazy. Same thing with Ohio, which has 17 electoral votes, and Florida with 30. So Republicans have a very, I guess, better math situation this year for Trump for sure, rather than in 2016 and 2020, where you're fighting for Florida, you're fighting for Ohio. It's just not the case anymore. So when it comes to Trump right now, his easiest path, I don't think you include Virginia in his easiest path just because, I mean, he's an underdog there. I would say Pennsylvania is looking very good. So to me, it would be Pennsylvania, Arizona. That would get Trump up to 248. You take back Georgia. Remember, Trump only lost Georgia by like point 0.2 or whatever it was. I mean, all these Arizona was even closer. Arizona was even closer. So that gets you to 264. And then I think it's very safe to say. I mean, you could say, well, just to get to 270, do Nevada, but I think North Carolina would be easier. North Carolina, a state that Trump has won both times in 2016 and 2020. So, especially with Trump kind of having a better sentiment with the polls this year in 2024, you would think. And guys, North Carolina was a state Hillary Clinton led throughout the entire cycle. Biden led throughout basically the entire cycle. It's not like North Carolina is the state where now suddenly Trump, because people are looking at some of the polls and seeing it tied, oh, now Trump's going to lose North Carolina. No, he's still performing way better in the North Carolina polls than he did in 2016 and 2020. So it's been consistent like that. So North Carolina is a state I would say for sure for Trump. And I would say that's probably the easiest way to look at it. Yes, you would say Pennsylvania could be pretty tough. But in terms of that path, you've got Pennsylvania, you've got taking back Georgia, you've got taking Arizona, and also North Carolina. And again, to me, that seems relatively easy. Now we can reset this and look for another path. If we do want to include, I don't know why that didn't go to that. If we do want to include in this path, Virginia, how easy can we make it? So let's give Trump Virginia very slightly, the Glenn Youngkin poll. Let's give him North Carolina because he took North Carolina in 2016, 2020. I think even liberals would say Trump's the favorite in North Carolina. The betting's got him at like a 65% chance right now. I think it's probably even more than that. So that gets Trump up to 247. And Trump, see, even with those 13 electoral votes in Virginia, it makes the paths so much easier because now he's already at 247. Technically, he does not need any of these Rust Belt states. You take back Georgia, a state that you barely lost, you're already at 263. And to be honest, you take Nevada, you win the election because it's tied. It goes to the House and Trump wins. So that's losing Arizona. That's losing the entirety of the Rust Belt. So you lose all the Rust Belt states and you lose Arizona on top of that. That is a big margin of error for Trump to still win the election because of the Virginia flip, which would be the state that is, obviously very, very important if you're able to expand that math. That's why we were talking about Virginia and Minnesota when it was Trump versus Biden being so important. If you include Virginia, it makes it that much easier for Trump to where you're not relying on those Rust Belt states. Now, right now, if I were to do based on leaning, I would say Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Virginia, I can't do it. North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada. I would say those states are leaning to Trump. I would give Harris Michigan right now, Virginia, and then Maine. And that would probably be around what it would look like. You've also got Nebraska second district. I knew it didn't add up to the correct number, but Nebraska second district, it's impossible to pick. I mean, Biden won it, so we'll just give it to Harris, whatever. So, 296 to 242, probably, I would say semi realistic. You could also give Harris Arizona. That would not surprise me at all. Her winning Nevada seems, I mean, these are all swing states, so it's hard for me to say for sure. But right now, I do think Trump might be a slightly bigger favorite in Nevada than Arizona. But those states, they're polling neck and neck in terms of, it's not like Trump's winning the Nevada polls by 5 and winning the Arizona polls by 2. They're both very close in terms of Harris versus Trump. So when it comes to the overall paths, I mean, we can go ahead and reset this. Again, when it comes to Minnesota, I just can't make it a swing state right now. There's just no way. New Hampshire, you could argue. New Hampshire, you could argue. I mean, if there were some polls that come out of Minnesota, it'll be interesting. But again, for Trump, the different paths, I mean, if he just takes all of the Rust Belt, it's going to be very easy for Trump because then he just takes North Carolina. You're already there. You take the Rust Belt, you take North Carolina, it's over. You don't need Georgia, you don't need Virginia, you don't need Nevada, you don't need Arizona. That's why the Rust Belt is so OP if you can sweep the Rust Belt. And that's what Trump did in 2016. If you sweep the Rust Belt, I mean, there's no way Trump loses. Obviously, there's no way Trump loses. He would have to lose every other swing state, and that's including North Carolina. So I would say for Trump, obviously that would be a good scenario. Even if he loses Michigan, it's not ideal, although that's kind of what people think right now. Michigan leaning towards Harris. I would say Wisconsin and Pennsylvania leaning to Trump, although Wisconsin, in terms of betting, is leaning slightly towards Harris, but that would put Trump at 263. You take Nevada, you win the election. It's as simple as that. That's losing Michigan. That's not even including Virginia or Georgia or Arizona or Maine. Although I don't think, I think Trump could still win that district in Maine. I don't think it really matters, but there was just one poll that had Harris up by a decent margin. I mean, you're talking about such a low population. It's hard to really say for sure. But when it comes to this, we can keep doing more different paths. But again, I think the easiest path would just involve Pennsylvania because the numbers just look so good right now in Pennsylvania. Virginia, in terms of easiest paths, not going to happen. I think taking back Georgia is a must. And then, I mean, you already win there. So Trump wins the election there, but that would be taking the second district in Nebraska, or excuse me, in Maine. And he might lose that. It just depends. So, but even if he did lose it, he'd bet 269, he'd still win. So that might be that's why Georgia, North Carolina, they're just the most impactful. I mean, look at the electoral vote, 16, 16, 19. Every other swing state is less. You take the big three, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, you win. You don't need Virginia. You don't need the states out west. You don't need the other two Rust Belt states. If you can just eke out a victory in Pennsylvania by a quarter of a point, remember, this is what Biden did. This is exactly what Biden did. They talk about, see, this is what they say. Oh, Biden wins by 7 million votes. No, Biden did not win by 7 million votes. They do that. It's very clever. He won by like 40K. It's very close. We go by the electoral college. So this is just kind of the wargaming the scenarios. And I would say that would probably be the easiest. Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia. I mean, I think we believe that Trump is going to be able to take Georgia and North Carolina. If he does, that puts him at 251. Even if he loses, let's just say for the sake of the argument, he loses the Rust Belt. He's still at 251 here. Harris is at 257. You take Arizona, you take Nevada, that gets you to 268. Now that Maine district becomes very important, and I'll tell you, that's the problem with losing the Rust Belt. It is an issue because now you're looking at some of these smaller districts. Can he win the district in Nebraska? If he wins that, he does win. That would be with Harris taking Virginia then. There's your tie scenario. Kind of I guess, more of a realistic tie scenario, I guess, with Trump taking the states out west and Harris taking the Rust Belt. But the Rust Belt is so important. Trump, at least, he needs to try and split the Rust Belt. I mean, there is a scenario for Trump to win it semi-comfortably if he's somehow able to take Virginia, but it just seems so unlikely. Well, I mean, I could see it, honestly. It would be unlikely, but if with the margins that we're seeing, he could lose all those three Rust Belt states very closely, and then I think narrowly win Virginia because he's only down by 3 in Virginia right now as it is, at least according to that poll. But this is just kind of wargaming what potentially could be happening here. Trump versus Harris and all of the major different paths for Trump. Obviously, you want to talk about how it used to be when it was Trump versus Biden. It was a little bit different. It's a lot better for sure. You would have Maine at large going to a swing state. I would say New Hampshire, New Jersey, no. But it would be more so like this. There's just a lot more options. Even New Mexico, they were saying, was possibly going to be a swing state in terms of that because Biden was polling really bad in New Mexico. I don't know how much that is the Democrats trying to force Biden out and leaking internal polls and things like that. It was such a mess with them and what they did with Biden. But either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.